The aftershock of the blast was more deafening than the force of the impact. The lingering, high-pitched whining deep in the eardrums went on for a painful few moments longer. The cascading sound waves were so powerful that they ripped straight through solid matter, throwing debris up into the air and launching it like projectiles of brick, masonry, and glass. The entire top floors of the building came showering down on the intended target, carried through the air aided by the heavy flaps of gigantic wings. On the ground, innocents had to contend with the onslaught of rubble that was raining down on them. A number of showering bricks and chunks of concrete smashed the cars parked on the street below, crushing the metalwork and smashing through windshields. From beneath a pile of rubble, 8 pairs of ginormous spider legs burst forth, sending even more debris flying. To the horror of anyone that stopped to watch, a huge arachnid form scuttled its way out from the brick-and-mortar bombardment that it had been buried under. Nothing could have prepared the bystanders for the clash of the ages they were witnessing. Choo Choo Charles and the Warden Dragon were locked in a deadly battle for supremacy that threatened to wipe New York City off the map. Little did anyone realize this whole conflict had been orchestrated by one nefarious individual, the man known only as the dreaded Dr. Wrath. But why? What would possess someone to summon these 2 Goliath-sized gladiators and goad them into a grudge match? It had all begun far out over the waters on the isolated little island of Aranirum. There, the locals were constantly terrorized by Choo Choo Charles, the infamous half-train, half-giga spider from hell. For decades, the demonic locomotive had scoured the surface of the small island, hunting down any human prey he came across. Over the years, far too many visitors and residents of Aranirum had met a grisly fate thanks to Choo Choo Charles, with the horrifying sight that met their eyes before death being the twisted, razor-toothed grin of the man-eating steam engine. Now, Charles was known to be pretty territorial, keeping control over the island of Aranirum through fear, and just by looking at him, it wasn't hard to see how he managed it. He was terrifying to behold. An old, rusted red steam train acted as a protective shell for the sinister spider creature beneath. Then there was his face, a haunting sight, with eyes so wide and pale that it was hard to make out his pupils. Not to mention all the bloodstains from devouring any humans he could find. Few people had made it to Aranirum to witness Charles in his natural habitat and managed to make their way back to safety in one piece. But an interested party had once received an invitation to come to the island under the protection of the Charles Mining Company. The wealthy industrialist, Warden Charles III, controlled most of the island, and he and some of his workers had even begun to worship the terrifying train monster after they discovered his eggs buried deep underground. Interested to know more about Choo Choo Charles, Warden Charles III had invited one Dr. Wrath to Aranirum personally. Now, Dr. Wrath was the leading and only expert in the world on monsterology. While most people just assumed he was a madman, Wrath had an encyclopedic knowledge of all manner of strange and scary beasts, and it was for that reason he gladly accepted Warden Charles III's invitation to the island. Dr. Wrath was fascinated by Choo Choo Charles, using binoculars to observe the spidery specimen at a safe distance, protected by a detail of Warden Charles's loyal workers. And the more that Dr. Wrath saw, the more captivated he became with Choo Choo Charles. Now, having dabbled with many things that most believed to be nothing more than fairy tales, Dr. Wrath was also well versed in the dark arts. He had knowledge of the mystical and occult that was unmatched by anyone else. He even knew of realms and worlds beyond, places it was only possible to reach if you knew the right spells. And it was a specific one of these other worlds that Dr. Wrath thought of when he watched Choo Choo Charles in the wild. The part train, part spider creature's behavior patterns were very similar to another monster Wrath had seen before, the legendary Warden Dragon. Dr. Wrath had visited this other, cubed world through a mystical portal and come across a being rarer than any other. The Warden Dragon was the combination of a winged beast of the sky and another creature called a warden. Nobody knew their true origin, but some stories suggested that these beings had once been strong iron golems that had fed on skulk growth, a rare plant that only grew in the deepest, darkest parts of this other world. So the legends told, one warden had encountered a dragon, and the mysterious magic properties of the skulk growth had presumably caused the two of them to join together and form the Warden Dragon. But of course, Dr. Wrath knew these weren't just myths and stories. It was true. He had seen the Warden Dragon for himself, with his own 2 eyes. Much like Choo Choo Charles, the Doctor of Monsterology had noticed the Warden Dragon was also fiercely territorial. However, while Charles scuttled about on the ground all over Aranerum, the Warden Dragon would instead circle its territory from above. If anyone accidentally set foot inside the perimeter of what the dragon considered to be its home, it would swoop down low, still staying in the air. From high up above, it would open its mouth and unleash its most devastating attack. When it had just been a dragon, it breathed fire like most others, but when joining with a warden, it had gained the warden's ability to give out a powerful sonic attack. The Warden Dragon would get closer to its prey and let out an enormous sonic boom, powerful enough to knock down almost any standing structure. And if someone was caught in that blast, the sound waves could send them hurtling through the air. Dr. Wrath also noticed the Warden Dragon was covered in dark blue scales, the color of the warden's skin. The scales were so tough that they offered more protection than even the best enchanted armor. And very similarly, Choo Choo Charles's train acted as a strong outer shell that protected his spidery body within. Dr. Wrath departed the island of Aranerum pondering the question, what would happen if these 2 creatures encountered each other? He was determined to reach an answer, and didn't care what he had to do to find out. Collateral damage meant nothing to him, however. In the Mad Doctor's mind, there was only one logical course of action: to bring the 2 beasts together and let them fight. However, the Warden Dragon's flight capabilities and Choo Choo Charles's penchant for crawling around on ground level meant he needed to have both creatures on an even and equally unfamiliar playing field. If he opened a mystic portal to allow the Warden Dragon through, it could just fly endlessly in circles around the island of Aranerum, while its spidery-legged adversary stayed down below, out of reach. Plus, the island was Charles's territory. It gave him the home field advantage. So the Master of Monsterology decided the perfect place to hold his test would have to be somewhere that offered an advantage to neither creature, somewhere with enough obstacles up high to get in the Warden Dragon's way, and that wasn't the wide-open island terrain that Choo Choo Charles was used to. Somewhere densely populated, bustling, and busy, where the 2 monsters could battle for dominance. New York City. It was perfect for the dastardly doctor's plans. Making his way to the roof of the Flatiron Building, overlooking Madison Square Park, Dr. Wrath consulted his occult texts and began reciting the right incantation to open up a portal to the world of cubes. Sure enough, a rectangular hole in the fabric of reality appeared in the sky, just above the height of some of the tallest skyscrapers in the city. Before too long, the curious combination of dragon and warden flew through it. The creature had flapped up to investigate, only to find itself in a strange new world. Acting quickly, Dr. Wrath opened up another portal, this time leading to Aranerum, opening out on 5th Avenue below. Within moments, Choo Choo Charles had come scurrying through, right into a busy New York street. Pandemonium broke out almost instantly. People started screaming and running for their lives as the horrifying train creature began devouring all in his path. High above, the Warden Dragon detected the sounds of commotion and swooped down low to survey the chaos. With its sonar hearing, it sensed Charles as he attacked any and all bystanders. The Warden Dragon regarded anything that it flew over as its territory and instantly identified the half-train, half-spider as the biggest threat. So it opened its jaws and hit him with a powerful sonic blast. Charles was eating as many nearby pedestrians as he could when suddenly a powerful, deafening shockwave sent him flying. The mass of spider limbs and steam train hurtled through the front corner of the Flatiron Building, smashing it to smithereens before he tumbled through Madison Square Park. Turning his attention to his aerial attacker, Charles started to scuttle through the streets, staggered by passing cars that tried to speed past or get out of the way of the terrifying train monster. Flying down from on high, the Warden Dragon tried to use another sonic attack, blasting apart nearby buildings. But the lower it flew, the harder it was to maneuver between the tight spaces, especially with its large wings. Suddenly, using his multiple legs, Choo Choo Charles attempted to scale a building, clambering up the side, tearing away at huge chunks as he crawled. The wall could barely hold the weight of the train-sporting tarantula, but he managed to get higher and higher until climbing atop the roof. The Warden Dragon spotted this and swooped in low, ready for another attack. But Charles waited. He readied his many legs, and just at the right moment, he leaped into the air, right as the Warden Dragon let out another enormous sonic attack. The force of the blast knocked Choo Choo Charles out of the air, sending him through another building across the street and causing enough rubble to rain down on him that it buried the terror of Aranirum. The Warden Dragon came into land, ready to inspect its adversary, only for Charles to burst out of the rubble a moment later. The two creatures were locked in combat, crashing into buildings and smashing them to bits as they grappled with each other. Charles swiped his many spider legs, scratching at the Warden Dragon's scales. The dragon tried to let out more sonic blasts, but Choo Choo Charles was using his legs to knock the Warden Dragon's head aside just as it was about to open its jaws, redirecting its blast so that it missed. Suddenly, Choo Choo Charles chomped at the Warden Dragon, his strong teeth struggling to pierce the tough scales. Charles was persistent, not letting up his grip, but the Warden Dragon quickly took notice of this. Unable to attack Charles on the ground, it spread its mighty wings and flapped, lifting the pair of them up off the ground. The Warden Dragon struggled. It couldn't reach its normal altitude with the extra weight of Charles's steam-trained shell and flailing spider legs, but it could get high enough, and even though Choo Choo Charles wasn't letting go, his teeth were starting to pull loose some of the dragon's protective scales. As they made it up into the air, Charles suddenly slipped, ripping out some of the Warden Dragon's scales as he began to fall. The half-train, half-spider tumbled through the air before coming down to land right on top of the Chrysler building. Charles was pinned in place, upside down, his multiple legs scrabbling as he tried to get back into an upright position. In the air above, the Warden Dragon was wounded from Choo Choo Charles's bite, unable to keep itself flying for much longer. Mustering up all its strength, the winged beast summoned up the most powerful sonic blast of all. The huge sound waves plumed outwards and hit Charles with full force, sending him crashing through multiple floors right down to the bottom, before the Warden Dragon came crashing down to Earth too. Dr. Wrath was stunned at what he'd seen, indifferent to all the carnage and destruction he'd unfurled on New York City. All the famous landmarks destroyed, all the people caught in the battle between Choo Choo Charles and the Warden Dragon, none of that mattered to him. He just couldn't believe he still didn't have an answer to his question, and given that he was quickly arrested soon after, it looked like he would never find out. That is, until it came time to clear away what was left of the Warden Dragon and Choo Choo Charles. Both were still alive.